What a treat for everyone today. It's a huge honor to me to be podcast interviewing Dean Mersky, who's graduated from dental school in 76, practiced for 26 years. And then in 2002, you've just been doing so many things. You were a private practice in Manhattan Beach, California. Then you were director of clinical communication for CapTech for years, lab consultant, implant manager in another lab. Then you started Optin Dental Lab Cooperative, marketing to dentists, Optin Dental Advantage for dentists, marketing to consumers. It seems like after 26 years, you just dived into so many different businesses related to dentistry. But I've been a fan of yours. I mean, gosh darn, Dean, you have 10,000 posts on Dental Town. You're just a wealth of information. You're a freak when it comes to sharing. I can remember you critiquing lab cases, God, back in what, 1998 on Dental Town, 1999? I mean, just amazing. Where do you get your energy from?
Oh man, in this industry, it's so much turmoil. I just wake up angry every day, and that's where I start. I'm just ready to go. but I learned that from the master back in the '90s when I first started reading your newsletters. Nobody could out anger or out talk or out convict Howard Ferran.
Oh my God! I started my magazine in '90. I started lecturing in '90. I started my newsletter in '94, and I didn't have any advertisers from '94 to '98, and my God, I was piss and vinegar in those days. So, what's got you the most angry today when you look out at your sovereign profession of dentistry?
Oh, geez, Howard. These podcasts last a week. I fired off an email. Normally, we have a private email network with our labs and our dentists, and sometimes I get angry and I'll just start typing, and then, I kind of I throw it away. Like Abe Lincoln used to write these letters to get things off his chest, and then he'd throw them in a drawer. But this morning I decided I'm going to go on a rant because I'm really angry. I found out that Delta Dental in Colorado opened up a hygiene clinic inside a Kaiser Medical Center. And that got me that set me off. And with all the things going on, that's the last thing that the dentists and the laboratories need in this country.
See, I was the opposite. I thought that was good news.
Oh, geez. Well, I look at it this way. I say, if I'm an insurance guy, I want to cut my expenses. That means I got to stop dentistry from producing as much as it produces. And if I can corner the hygiene market, and I can keep patients coming in and keeping their teeth clean, that's gonna help me lower costs. But if I can keep them there for diagnosis instead of going into the dentist for diagnosis, that'll also lower my costs. And that's how I see it. And I think that's not fair to patients, and it's not fair to the industry. In fact, it'll affect everybody in the industry, manufacturers included.
I think the main advantage of me being 54, you being you just turned 67.
Yes.
And you have more hair than me, and you look younger than me. Is that we get to we don't see these pictures for the first time. Like, remember, let's go back 30 years when Cigna started saying, "Hey, we're selling the insurance. We're going to open our own dental offices and provide it. We'll make money on both ends." And then they were stunned at the overhead of providing the dentistry, and it took them years to figure out. I don't know how these dentists make money. A lot of them thought they must be doing this stuff at a loss. And you don't see Cigna. How many Cigna dental offices are there today? So I think Delta, since they didn't do their history lessons, I think when they open up a hygiene practice and start buying ADEC operatories and staff and receptionists and health insurance and 401k and all that goes in, they're going to figure out in about 8 seconds, oh my God, how do you pay all this on a $50 cleaning? I mean, history just keeps repeating itself. I mean, we could say the same about corporate dentistry. I mean, Dean, you and I had specific discussions 20 years ago when Orthodontic Centers of America made it to the New York Stock Exchange or a dozen on NASDAQ. Every single one of them went bust. And then it took a decade for everybody to forget about it. And now they're back. And my litmus test again is Wall Street didn't forget about last time. Not one of those corporate dental chains could go public, period. They're not a growing, profitable business. None of them can do an IPO. My litmus test on corporate is, oh, if you're all that, you're sustainable, you're going to be here in 10, 20 years, go public. No one will touch you.
Yeah, that's one way of looking at it. I tend to take one step further and put a what if in front of it. What if this is the formula that works? Now they're partnering with the medical center. What if this is the formula that works? The alliances are different. Now you've got corporate dentistry, which are forming alliances with the insurance companies. Now you've got both of those sectors cutting deals with manufacturers. That wasn't quite the case a long time ago. So it becomes, all right, what do you do as a private practitioner? Well, you need to get better at business. You need to do the things that you need to do. Okay, well, what if you do those things and then those other guys fail? Well, you're just a better business. That's how I see it. It's like playing football. When I played football, we never wanted to win by 1 point. We wanted to win on every play. And so when I wake up angry every day, that's how I see the world. What am I going to make better today for somebody?
What position did you play in football?
Oh, this will crack you up. I was a center. I was a 155-pound center. This is a great story. I've always been undersized. Everybody's counting out private practice, and I'm trying to protect private practice. That's kind of how I played football. In my junior year, I was 145, and I was second string, and I was so angry because I didn't get bigger. So I spent the next 9 months lifting weights. I said, I'm going to be as strong as I can possibly be. I don't know how strong that is. I don't even know how to lift weights. But I went at it. And by the start of the next season, I was bench pressing 325 and doing half squats with over 400 pounds. I had a strategy. That was my first strategy, was to be the strongest guy on the team. The next strategy was to be the meanest. So I was 155 pounds like a pit bull. And my goal was to hit everybody so hard that they forgot about the game and thought about me. That was my goal on every play. And I made first string. And then I was all league and all area and nominated for all state, 155-pound center and a linebacker. So that's how I go at things. If they think I'm crazy or something, I don't know how to go at something unless you really devote your everything you got to win by as much as possible.
I have the same story from high school football, but my position was water boy, and my goal was to be able to carry the most bottles onto the field. And only an octopus beat me.
I'll bet by the time you were done, the entire stadium was watching you.
I was 93 pounds freshman year of high school, and had joined the wrestling team not by my will. The coach said, "How much do you weigh?" And I said 93. He says, "I have no one for 98. You will join the wrestling team, October 1st, after school." And I had 5 sisters and played Barbie dolls my whole life. And I'm like, okay. I only did it because he made me. And so where is private practice today, Dean? A lot of these, answer this specifically. A lot of the kids walk out of school and they look at Dean and they say, "Dean, you were lucky, man. You graduated in the golden days in 1976 when Motown was still owning Detroit. And now we're coming out at 2016 where the landscape's owned by Heartland and Aspen and Pacific Dental Services." What would you say? What is the state private practice? Where is it today? And was it better when you got out, or is it better now?
Yeah, that's a great question, Howard. There's a few of us in the business end that have been talking about this because we see 3 different markets of dentists. Affectionately, at least on Dental Town, we call the old guys one market. Then you got the middle-aged guys that have been in practice maybe around 20 years as a second market. And then you've got the younger dentists coming out of school, maybe as much as 5 to 6, 7 years. They call themselves the newbies. And they couldn't be more different from one end to the other. When I graduated, everything was about how thin and burnished can you make your gold margins. That was the world. And it really was a great era. Insurance was an asset when it finally came out. It certainly didn't get in the way of anything. But that began to change, and the guys in the middle, they had a taste of what we were about in the old guys. But now they're having to deal with the competition of losing patients to corporate dentistry and a middle class that's shrinking and becoming less wealthy, and all the pressures that we all know about in the economy, and the growing influence of insurance. And then there's the new guys coming out. They never were exposed to burnishing gold margins. Now they're being exposed more often, and we were never exposed to this, but they're being exposed more often to learning how to survive in Medicaid dentistry. Many of the schools are pushing in that direction. So it really is, it couldn't be much more different than it is. I think the problems that the new dentists face are completely different than what we faced. And as the older dentists begin leaving, the guys in the middle are trying to figure out how they're going to make it to the end, and the new guys are trying to figure out how they're going to make it quite often. I think it's quite a shift, and I think that much of the trouble that the younger dentists face is because my generation did not keep tabs of the ship.
So what should the young kids do now when they're coming out of school?
They've got a challenge, man. Some of them are $400,000 or more in debt. Some of them are better off. I went into corporate dentistry for a few months, probably, about 6 months at one point. And it was a good experience. I learned a few things. I think that's important because private practice, you have to know more sometimes, depending on the setting you're in, especially more than a health center. I think they got to keep their bills paid. If a guy comes out of school with $400,000 in debt, and he takes a $125,000 job that's paying him to start, he's going to end up with about $90,000 after taxes. If he's got a 10-year note, he's paying over $4,000 a month. He's going to end up with $50,000 in the pocket at the end of taxes and paying that note. That's quite a jolt for 10 years that you got to face. And yet some of these schools are still promising, the end of the rainbow for students coming in. It just isn't that. I don't know that there's an answer, Howard. I think they have to do whatever they can to survive financially, to learn their profession, and then if it suits them, they definitely should go into private practice if that's what they want.
Well, it's so success is always counterintuitive, and that about 17% of the dental students have no debt because their dad was called doctor, and then about a third have about 100, but a third have 200, a third have 300 or more. But if you had no problem borrowing a bunch of money to be a doctor, then you just can't graduate and say, okay, I lost all my drive to borrow money, and now I'm just going to take a low stress job and make $150 a year, as you say. It's kind of like if you had the balls to borrow $350,000, you better find the balls again to borrow another $750 and buy an office and crush it, because you have so much debt, you almost have to be successful to pay it. I mean, to me, the only people that can go get a job, that should be getting a job in corporate or for a salary, are the ones that didn't have any student loan debt or only had 100 or something manageable. But if you have a lot of student loan debt, you need to go out and buy a big practice and run it.
Well, that's one thought. When you and I went to school, we had a lot of clinical education. I could not read research, but we could do anything. We did everything. I would say that we probably did more preparations, whether it be crowns or fillings, in the first year of school than a lot of these kids get their whole 4 years these days. from what they tell me, not all schools, I can't speak for all schools, but for the schools that the young guys have told me about, they're graduating with very little experience. And that certainly is going to hold them back in private practice. That's a liability. I did 6 full mouth cases my first year in private practice. Now, we were constantly taught occlusion. I did a molar endo my first week in private practice. We did these things. And I felt I could do a lot. Now, I have to tell you, as you probably have experienced yourself, and in fact, I think we all experience, we don't know what we don't know. And I was lucky I didn't screw something up and get sued, because there was a lot I didn't know. But there was a lot I didn't know, and we had a lot of clinical education. If you've got somebody with half that clinical education, just think how much they're missing.
So we talk about where dentistry is. Where's the consumer at today? What is, in 2016, what does the American consumer think about dentistry? Where is their mind at?
Yeah, huge question, because I think it's more societal than just dentistry. I think, when my father went through the Depression, the first Depression, this last collapse was a depression. It wasn't a recession. I live in Philadelphia, and there's people here that know some of the people on the Reserve Board, Federal Reserve, and it came to me, secondhand, that the government didn't want to call it a depression, so they called it a recession. They didn't want us to think it was a depression. So he came out of that first depression, and he refused to buy stock. He was conditioned. And so I think people, when they go through these hard times, and these are protracted hard times that we're still facing today, they're conditioned before they even think about going to the dentist. They don't have the income that they used to have, and the people that should be coming up, the millennial generation that should be coming up, has got everybody scared because they're not finding jobs and having to live at home. Everybody's kind of pulled back. So by the time they get to us, and the insurance companies have conditioned them to think that they're entitled to everything, I think it's, if the dentist has not spent time learning excellent communication skills to set themselves apart, then they simply will become part of the commodity mindset that healthcare itself has created.
You've started a couple of different businesses lately. One is Optin Companies, Optin Dental Advantage. Talk about the companies. I'm on Optin Companies right now, and then I'm on Optin Dental Lab. What is Optin Companies?
Optin Companies is just the aggregate, AKA, you might say, of 2 organizations that are sister organizations. One is for labs and the other is for dentists. Labs and dentists are the only 2 real stakeholders in dental care. They're the only 2 that deal directly with a patient in one way or another, and they are interdependent upon each other. And so even though they're so closely related, they really are different. And having been in both worlds and still in both worlds, I can speak with some confidence about that. So one organization focuses, you know what it is? We used to focus just on marketing and group purchasing. That's how it all started. But with the changes that have taken place in the industry, we're focusing now more on business development and heading closer and closer to business development within the membership. That makes sense?
Yeah, so you started as kind of to help them marketing and purchasing supplies, but now it's more in trying to develop them to be a CEO to run their dental office.
Yeah, they'd be either the dental office or the lab. Yeah, that's right. When we started the labs, it was to give them one name, one brand, so we could market all these small labs nationally under a brand, because a brand identity works. And then also the group purchasing works. But the market's changed. Advertising is not what it used to be in terms of labs, unless you're a low price leader and you're pulling people in that way. So we don't do that anymore. It doesn't work. Things change. People change. Times change. The younger dentists, they don't believe the ads. And maybe they got a point. How can we be the best when there's 1,000 labs out there saying they're the best? And in the lab world, the products have become commoditized. It becomes difficult to tell them apart. So at that point, now you're talking about services. And services are very difficult for a lab to market, at least as difficult for a dentist to market. I've stood up in lectures and I've looked at two dentists and I say, okay, I'm a patient looking for a dentist. Why should I go to your office instead of his office? And the dentists look at me and they don't have a thing to say, and maybe they're embarrassed, they don't want to put somebody down. But if we can't differentiate our offices, well, then we're just a commodity. And those are the kinds of things we're working on now. In fact, we just launched an investigation into the insurance industry that we've partnered with two law firms to conduct. So we are taking on business with that old football mentality, you might say.
So who is that against? I see your thread on Dental Town today. It's a monster thread. It's on today's active topics. Of course, with 10,000 posts, you're always on today's active topics. What's the name of that thread? Well, there's a couple that you're posting on now.
Yeah, there's one in restorative and one in insurance for dentists. And it's insurance investigation.
It's called Investigation Initiated as Class Action Precursor Dental Benefits Management by Insurance Companies. Is that the one you're talking about?
Yeah, that's what we started today. I've been working on securing a legal team for about 2.5 years. People ask me, what do you do? What do you do? Well, I can't explain it, and I can't tell you anyway. But I've spent 2 years trying to put this together. And finally, I was able to pull together two legal firms, and they've agreed to take this on, and they're going to investigate the complaints that dentists are making on a daily basis by the thousands, and pull that together if possible and turn it into a class action suit if it's warranted. And they've asked me not to be specific about what they're looking for or looking at. So forgive me for not being specific. I hate not being specific. You know how I am. But it's not that insurance is inherently bad. It's some of the things they do are inherently evil.
What are things insurance companies do that are inherently evil?
Well, they may dissuade a patient from seeing a legitimate dentist. They sometimes, we've seen instances of absolute pathology that was denied a claim that should have been covered, and various other things. Like I said, they've asked me not to be specific.
Yeah.
But, and it's not that dentists are all saints. We know that not every dentist is a saint. We know that. But patients deserve always the best. They really, whatever they can afford. When I was in practice, I had a high-level practice. It was an expensive practice. Not everybody could afford a crown. But if they could only afford a filling, I gave them the best possible filling I could give them. And everybody deserves the best we can do. And part of the best we can do is to protect the patients from being abused wherever that is. That's part of, if they can't trust us, who can they trust? It's a rhetorical question, I know.
Well, no, it's a sad thing in healthcare. If the physicians all become employees, then who do the patients turn to when they need a physician? If all the doctors work for the insurance companies, where do patients go when they need a doctor? That just is what it is. It's a sad state.
I lived through it. A couple years ago, I had an H. pylori infection. I did all the research. I knew what I had. I know how to read research. You know that. I walked into this guy. It wasn't somebody I knew. I was referred to somebody different. I ended up in this guy's office at Penn. I wrote a blog on this recently. And instead of running tests or giving me antibiotics, he wanted to run me into a CAT scan. I had an infection in my stomach. He wanted me to go in a CAT scan. And I kept saying no, and I wasn't getting better. And finally, after a couple of months, I medicated, and I killed it. But it doesn't work that way in today's medicine. And that's kind of where we're headed in dentistry, unfortunately.
Yeah, my boy had a bump just 6 months ago. He had a bump, and he was concerned, and he was hurting, and I could tell he's really worried. So I took him to the emergency room, Chandler Regional Hospital. They go back there, and he's an adult, so I said, "You want me to stay here or go or whatever?" He said, "Well, I'll text you if I need you." I didn't know what was going on, so I stay out there, and somebody looks at the bump and immediately orders a CAT scan of his lower abdomen. He's a boy, so it had been in the area of his genitalia, and then I go back there, and then the doctor comes in and says, "Oh, that's just a little bump. That's nothing. Doesn't need anything." I said, "Then why do they take a CAT scan?" And he goes, "God, they didn't take a CAT scan." And I go, "Yeah." He goes, and then he turns to the girl, "Why the hell did you take a CAT scan?" And I mean, a doctor didn't even order, but you know why they took a CAT scan. I got the bill. It was $6,000.
That's the point. That's where medicine is. And that's part of the problem when the corporates come in to healthcare. And it's not that business is bad. Business does what it does. It just shouldn't do it in healthcare, in my opinion. And you experienced it. I experienced it. Just this past week, I wanted to go in for a checkup. I looked up the guy's name. There was the phone number. I called. I made an appointment. And she said, "Okay, you'll see Dr. So-and-so at 8 o'clock. I said, "Wait, I didn't call Dr. So-and-so. I called this guy." "Oh, well, you got Jefferson." "I didn't call Jefferson. I called this doctor." "No, you got Jefferson." Jefferson Health, yeah, they got a good reputation, but I'm not going to see a building. But that's how you're processed. It's now patient processing, not patient caring.
Dean, you have as much experience with dental labs as you do with dentistry. I mean, I can't think of a dentist who practiced 26 years and knows more about dental labs than you do. Do you think CAD/CAM has changed the way dentists diagnose and treat? How do you think CAD/CAM has changed dentistry and dental labs?
Boy, that's a great question. I don't think, well, aside from some of what goes on, I want to say this the right way because I don't want to offend anybody and not meaning to. There's probably a lot more CAD/CAM generated inlays or onlays because of Syracuse, and I don't want to say that they're wrong for doing it. I think that's just one change. That's just a difference. Did they replace the gold that was used for inlays and onlays? Perhaps. I just can't say it was wrong. I just see it's changed. But as far as crowns go, I think the only change we're seeing really is the placement of margins, and that might be just generational than it is CAD/CAM. I don't think people are diagnosing more. The information I have from labs is that there are not more crowns being done, but that the PFMs are being converted more and more into all ceramics. And in terms of materials go, the average all ceramic is far more predictable and more consistent than a PFM ever was. There certainly were some wonderful PFMs being produced by some labs. And then, of course, there was average. But the average crown today, coming out of CAD/CAM, is probably, on average, a better crown than it used to be.
That's an amazing endorsement. When you and I got out of school, there were 15,000 labs in America, and now today, 30 years later, there's half that number. Why do you think that happened? And can you think linear, where we've gone from 15,000 to 7,500, so another 30 years, you'll cut that number in half again, and there'll be, 2,000? Or where do you think? Why do you think it went from 15,000 to 7,500, and where do you think it'll be in 10, 20, 30 years?
That's I don't know if you intended it to be, but it's an intuitive question, and the intuitive nature of it reflects straight back to the private practitioners. Because what you're going to see, what we're seeing in the lab industry, probably at some level will happen in dental care. Those that went out of the lab business first were the weakest in their business performance. They either were weak in communication, weak in skills, weak in business intelligence. All of those things played a role. The next level were those that refused to change with the times and adapt with digital technology. Now, there's another layer to this. It's almost like a three-dimensional game board. As pressures came down upon dentists with fees, a lot of dentists, some of them entrepreneurial, some of them probably weaker, started looking overseas. So today we have somewhere between 40 to 50% of the lab work going offshore. That immediately kills out the weakest labs. The next aspect of this on that three-dimensional game board is that with private practitioners losing somewhere around 30 million patient visits per year to just the largest DSOs, that's just the largest DSOs, those patients and restorative lab needs they have are oftentimes going offshore, and they're not available to the labs as they're not available to the dentists. And all of those things will play havoc on the future of the labs. They're losing about 300 labs, 300 labs a year. I think that's the rate. 3%. They're losing about 3%, according to Inside Dental Technology. I think it is either that or Lab Management Today.
How many labs do you think there are today?
About 6,000.
It's 6,000.
Yeah, it was 15. Now it's 6,000.
Yeah.
That's one more giant bit of technology disruptor.
Well, it's
wow.
But that's $1 million question, because like I remember, I lived through the stock market from 93 to 2000, when a monkey could double their money in a year picking a stock, and humans think linear, and there are books being published called Dow 40,000, and then of course it crashed. So there is another side of that. Is this cyclical? I mean, do you think people that have been using CAD CAM for 4 or 5 years are saying, you know what, I really don't want to become a lab tech. I really don't want to spend an hour in this room scanning, glazing, staining, all this. Do you see any of these first 15,000 CAD CAM users in the United States going back to labs as cyclical, or do you just see the CAD CAM just marching upward and onward and upward and onward?
The nature of the mouth, in my opinion, is such that there'll always be a need for labs. I think with time, the need for labs will diminish. I just think that's probably natural, given the technology that will be developed. And there will also be a shortage. There's a shortage now. I talk to labs a lot. They're looking for somebody with knowledge. And that really is the key. And I think dentists who don't support the domestic labs, and this is not an axe to grind, it's not me trying to promote something here, but if you're not promoting your domestic labs, you're going to lose the knowledge base. And dentists rely a lot on the labs, quite a bit, especially for implants. I can tell you, when I was working in the lab, I was amazed at how much I did not know about what they do for the dentists. And I was with labs, as you know, I worked for CapTech for almost 8 years. I knew about labs, but until you work in one and you have to answer the questions for a dentist from a technician standpoint and understand what they do, it's just another world.
Who are those two Italian boys, Nick and
Lou Azzara?
Nick and Lou Azzara. If those aren't the two finest men in all of dentistry, I don't know who would be.
Oh, they're the greatest guys. I've learned so much from them.
Now, what, Nick's in Florida and Lou's in Florida?
Both are in Florida, near Orlando.
Huh. And where are they working now? Bego? B-E-G-O?
Well, they've both pretty much left Bego. Nick is now consulting in the business world of clinical dentistry. And Lou is now consulting for a large dental lab group. They're both tremendous guys, very knowledgeable, great leaders, and they're applying those skills to what they do.
That was the neatest thing of my entire memory of CapTech was just meeting those two fine gentlemen.
Yeah, they loved you. They did. They loved you.
Did they? They
Yeah,
were just some of the nicest guys. So let's go back to your deal, Optin Dental. So my homies are listening to you right now. Should they join? How do they join? Why should they join? How much is it? Tell them the whole deal.
It's $99 a month, and it's monthly, so it's no long-term contracts. And our purpose, every great company, and I'm not saying we're a great company, we got a ways to go, got more to accomplish. But every great company has a purpose. And the purpose generally in the visionary companies, as Collins and Parash wrote in Built to Last, is a higher level purpose, not about a profit and loss. And our higher level purpose is to help educate patients on how important it is to find a trustworthy dentist. That's the message we're trying to get out. The more members we have, the more we can get that message out into the public, because it's all scalable. And I'm not trying to get rich. If I was trying to get rich, I would have done something else. So we try to grow so that we can get more done. We have discounts. We just put a deal together with a leading manufacturer who's offered to give our members DSO pricing. So now that we got private practice guys getting DSO pricing, at least from one manufacturer. And we've had other discounts. And they've basically helped support putting this lawsuit together. It's been these members of ours, both labs and dentists.
How many dentists and labs have joined you?
Well, we've got over 100.
Nice.
Yeah.
I mean, the power of 100, that's a hell of a lot more powerful than one.
There's no power in one in this. I mean, Mike Barr's a good friend of ours, and he's tried really hard, but he's been trying as a power of one. It's hard. I couldn't do it as one. Who can?
What do you mean? I didn't get the Mike Barr analogy.
Well, Mike was on a thread, and I like Mike a lot, and he was talking about some of the things he tried to get done for people, and you just can't have an impact in a corporate world as a single entity, as an individual. It's impossible. I couldn't do it myself. So we're all about bringing people together. Part of the problem and the challenge for dentists is that we always tend to think what we can do as an individual. And if we can't fix it for ourselves as an individual, we sometimes get lost in the thought that it can't be fixed. And what I try to explain to people is, no, that's not true. If we had 1,000 dentists paying $100 a month, that'd be, what's that? That's $100,000 a month. A lot can be done with $100,000 a month. Look what you've done. It doesn't happen overnight either, as you know. If you had 1,000 dentists, 10,000 dentists, you'd have $1 million a month. We've got 100,000 private practices in this country. There's a lot of power out there, but they just have to come together. They don't have to do anything. I'm not an expert in all the stuff that we're trying to get done. I bring experts around me. Jack Welch was not an expert in engineering. Jack Welch was not an expert in anything that GE did. What he was an expert in was bringing great people in who were experts and could do all the things that needed to get done to make GE a great company. That's what we're trying to do.
I'll never forget the most amazing story about the power of one, though, in my backyard. So I'm here in Ahwatukee, which was its own little city south of Phoenix. And when I got here in '87, of course, it got annexed by Phoenix. Phoenix is just a big beast that just swallows up all the surroundings. So we got swallowed up, but everybody here still calls it Ahwatukee. But anyway, there's a guy out there who graduated from the military academy, started a resort out here. His name was Bob Gosnell. And I was talking to him one time, and he was lecturing to our group, and he said that this one little grandma kept complaining that there wasn't a fence around his golf course, to keep the javelinas out, and that by letting the javelinas eat on the grass, and the maintenance people were chasing it off, and she thought one of them was going to get killed or this or that, and it was just some little old grandma, and he didn't pay any attention to her. And she wrote him another letter, and he just thought, crazy old lady, whatever. And he still didn't do anything about it. And he got a third letter, still didn't do anything about it. Next thing, she just was obsessed with this. She contacted everybody that she could have contacted, from the governor to the mayor, everything. So when they came out to look at it, it turned out his golf course was actually on part of the city park of South Mountain illegally and had to be removed. Well, on an 18-hole golf course, you can't just say, oh, now we have 17. So then he ended up having to go find land on the other side of the mountain that he could buy in exchange with the guy. Anyway, long story short, he had to go buy this gazillion-dollar piece of land on the other side, all these lawyers, a year's commotion, and he always goes back and said, God dang it, all I had to do was go talk to this lady, shake her hand, press the flesh, and find out where I needed a damn fence, to keep these javelinas coming in from South Mountain. And so the power of one can still be a sword. And I think of Mike Barr and you, a power of one. I mean, you're just an entity of and all by yourself. So it'll be interesting to watch your group. So how do they join? They go to Optin Companies?
You can go to optincompanies.com, click on the dentist for dentists, or click on the lab for lab, and just follow the prompts. Any questions, of course, they can find me, get a hold of me. Yeah.
And from working both sides of the aisle, I mean, you were a dentist for a long time, probably 26 years, probably, I don't know, probably a third of the people listening to this podcast aren't even 26. They don't get to see the other side of the business. What lesson do you think you learned? I remember when I started out. Do you remember an old German guy out in Phoenix called Wolfgang? You remember him?
No, I don't.
I think in my experience, the best laboratory technicians I'd ever met were trained in Germany, because that's another thing that I think went wrong with dental labs. We trained the dentist professionally, we trained the hygienist professionally, and they shut down all the Crown and Bridge lab programs.
Yes.
I mean, how many Crown and Bridge lab programs were there in the 70s, and how many of them are there now?
Oh, there's probably about 10% left.
So what were the dentists and the dental schools thinking when they closed down 90% of all the dental laboratory stuff?
Well, this is part of the problem. We learned to do, you probably learned to do lab work. We had a lab in our basement in Detroit where I went to school, and we were waxing and casting all the time. We had to wax and cast everything that we put in the mouth. We had to set our own denture teeth. We knew that aspect of it. Now, the new aspects today with the implants and the CAD-CAM, that's a whole nother lesson that I had to learn when I went to work in a lab. But you're right, the German technicians they get a master's in dental technology, and it's 5 or 6 years. The global dental director for Necera in Germany, the company that we distribute for here, after he finished his education, he came here and interned with Goldstein Garber. I mean, he had to go through an internship before he got his degree and his ticket to work. We're losing that, and the dentists of today are losing a valuable asset and a basis for dental care. I mean, you can't separate that stuff from what we do as dentists.
How do you spell Necera?
N-A-C-E-R-A.
N-A-C-E-R-A?
Yeah, the website is it's necera.us.
What do they sell?
They have zirconia. It's a great zirconia, and some ceramic products that they use with the zirconia for coloring and glazing.
Oh, so this is a company for your labs?
Yeah, it's for labs. There's nothing for the dentist. The end product is great, but for the dentists and the patients.
But back to the original story is, I was calling, I decided I was going to get my FAGD, so I started going to all these courses, meeting other FAGDs and MAGDs, and they were telling me locally here in Phoenix, you got to use this Wolfgang. So I started sending myself to Wolfgang. So I called him up and I said, well, how does mine look? And he's like, he didn't even know what to say. He's like, I think you need to come down here. But what I thought was so neat is if you're humble and you go down there and you say, please critique me. Because when I talk to the labs, most lab people are afraid to call the dentist and say anything that, you don't have enough production. I mean, you sent me a triple tray with a damn bloody cotton roll in it. But anyway, I went down to Wolfgang's and just looked at hundreds of incoming cases, and he was telling me everything he liked, didn't like, whatever. And then in Nogales, Arizona, there's a partial lab. Do you know that partial lab down there in Nogales that does our removable cast frames? They cast about 1,000 to 1,500 partials a day. And I went down there, and 90% of the impressions, the lab script just says lower partial. Didn't cut a receipt, no design, just lower partial and an impression. And then you see these 10% where, they would cut a receipt, they might design it. I mean, you just really see the Pareto effect, the 80-20 rule. I mean, it's just amazing. And if you're listening to me right now, you need to call your lab man or woman and say, look, I'm not an arrogant doctor. I'm not an arrogant dentist. I'm humble. Feel safe to call me. Same thing with leaders. I mean, some leaders, none of their employees bring them any problems because you always freak out, lose your temper, cut their head off. You always kill the messenger. And you have to make everyone feel safe to give you the bad news. Otherwise, Sapien is only going to tell you, oh man, you look great. You look awesome. You're awesome. They'll just tell you good things. You got to make them feel safe to tell you the bad and the ugly. And lab people, I feel sorry for lab people. They're just afraid they don't want to lose a $5,000 a month account by telling you that your preps suck.
Yeah, you're right. And I think that comes back to purpose. I mean, part of what I had to go through when I was in the business world was understand why I'm doing the things I'm doing. And I can't say that I really articulated that when I was in clinical practice. It wasn't part of the regimen. You might know it, you might fulfill it, execute it, but to articulate it, we're not trained that way. But really our job as both a technician and as a dentist is to restore and maintain health. That's it. And if we can do a better job of that by doing what you said, which is to opening the communication channels between labs and dentists, and for the lab folks to feel comfortable in making a suggestion that would help do a better job of restoring and maintaining health for patients, then we're doing the right things.
How could anybody listen to you help on your class action lawsuit?
Well, the class action lawsuit is not about us at all. It's about the dentists and the patients. We're not involved in any aspect of reviewing or negotiating or any of that. So all the dentists have complaints at some point in time or feel they've been wronged or their patients have been wronged at some point in time. Whatever it is they feel they've been wronged about, they should contact one of the two attorneys that's listed online, share the information, either an anecdote or the documentation, and just as much as they can. If they've got 50 instances, then share all 50. If they've got one, share one.
Now, the American Dental Association has 450 employees, give or take a few, and about 20 attorneys. Are they helping you? Are due paying 20 attorneys helping you in this case? Have you contacted them?
The ADA is just too cumbersome to work with. So the answer is no, I've not contacted them. I want to get things done. I set out to do this 2 years ago. I got it done now. Now it's up to the dentist. I don't want to see it get mired in committees and this and that, because it's a big organization. They have their protocols for how they do things. I respect that. Like you, we're entrepreneurial. We want to flip a switch and do it now. Time's a wasted. I've already wasted 2 years trying to put it together. So we got it. Let's go do it.
And how will you judge this a success? How long? What are your hopes for this?
Well, the attorneys are not on a salary, so they make money if they take this to court and they win a settlement. And the sooner that dentists are providing them with information they can use, the sooner they can make the assessment that, yes, this is worthy of taking to court, and they'll get it moving.
So, Dean, back to you're a dentist and you've worked so much experience with dental labs. Did you ever think when you got out of school in '76 that you would see the death of the PFM?
I didn't think I'd see any of this stuff. When you and I got out, I think when you got out, but I know for sure when I got out, people said, hey, all you need is your shingle and everything will be great. You'll have it made. And I remember in Detroit was very conservative. It was very old school. And you could actually think that if you got your so-called shingle, you'd have it made. Then when I got back to California in Los Angeles, where I was from, I'm looking and I'm seeing billboards with dental ads and yellow pages. I came from like the bastion of conservatism in dentistry to Hollywood, I mean, and I know, what did I get into? That was my first notion, but I had no idea where this was going to go. Not a clue. You're right. In so many ways.
So you were born in Manhattan, California?
I was born in Los Angeles. I actually lived in Malibu.
So how did you go from Malibu and the warmth and all that all the way to Pennsylvania in the cold winters? Did you really like the winters more than the Southern Cal winters?
Oh yeah, there's a good dose of self-hate, I think. I don't know.
I mean, that's a culture shock.
Well, to live in Malibu, you got to be wealthy and pretty, and I was neither, so they chased me out of there. Unfortunately, I have a beautiful family, and they had to suffer with me. But I went into the banking industry, and the second largest banking center was in Charlotte, so that's where I went first. And we stayed there for a while, and the family decided they wanted to go north. And then I went to work for CapTech and out of banking, and 50% of the population is east of the Mississippi, so we decided to stay in this area, and then we just got acclimated to it. Man, you can't get a cheesesteak anywhere but Philly. You're kidding yourself otherwise.
I love Philadelphia. And Howard Goldstein lives on near there. He lives in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, he's about an hour and a half north. Yeah.
Yeah, I love Philadelphia. I love the Norman Rockwell Gallery across from the Liberty Bell.
Yeah.
Have you ever been to there?
I live 2 blocks.
Seriously?
Yeah, we sold our house in Doylestown when the girls were out. We sold the house, and I'm right now sitting in a high-rise apartment. I'm looking out a giant window into the city as I talk to you. Wow,
that is a very, very cool city. So what advice would you give the young kids on the materials? I mean, I want you to be specific. Podcasters are young. People my age and your age aren't really podcasters. I personally don't know any dentist my age that does podcasts. But they're out of school. The first several years, they just need to focus on basics. It's like if you're going to win a football team, let's just get down a block, a tackle, a pass, and a reception. Let's just work on that. Let's get down a filling and a crown, etc. So the most crowns are a single unit on a first molar. What advice would you give them on a single unit crown on a first molar? What takeaways after all your experience as a dentist and a lab man on a single unit crown?
I think based on what I've seen in the lab and what I'm hearing and what all the stuff that goes on, the first advice is forget about half of what they taught you on how to do things. Use common sense and then watch what happens, because we're going to learn a lot just from that. The next is don't worry about getting an exposure. So many dentists underprepare the occlusal table, even the older guys, because they're concerned about an exposure. We used to drill down 2 millimeters routinely every day through dozens of teeth just to put a silver filling in, remember? 2 millimeters. I mean, now you're looking at, you don't hardly have a millimeter of clearance sometimes because they don't want to get a root canal. You got to go 5 or 6 millimeters before you hit the nerve. So make sure you understand what kind of thickness that the material you're going to use requires. Use a depth cut to make sure you've accommodated that thickness, and use a margin that the tooth itself will allow you to use with the material that you've decided upon, or modify to a different material if the tooth won't allow you to use that material. Got to think outside the box. Don't get into biases, because that's going to cause you to screw up.
And for first molar, would you go zirconia and cement it? Would you go Emax and bond it? What would your standard routine go-to first molar all porcelain crown be?
Yeah, I think that depends a lot of times. It depends on what the tooth gives you and what the patient is paying. If the Emax is costing more than zirconia, and the patient is not paying as much as you would hope because of insurance or whatever the limitation is, there's nothing wrong with a well-made zirconia crown. If you need some extra aesthetics, then it used to be that Emax was a good call, but now you've got some great looking zirconia. I think it's a toss-up, except in 2 areas. If there isn't enough retention to hold a zirconia crown, and you do need some retention in the crown prep, then you're better off bonding an Emax.
I want you to walk him through the logistics. Right now, she's 27. She's in Salina, Kansas. She's got, she's using Impergum from 3MSV and a sightless Premier triple tray. She sends it down the street. Her lab man makes a, a zirconia, $99 CAD CAM zirconia. Everyone's telling her to buy an oral scanner. Does that economically make sense? I mean, does it make sense to go from a low-cost Impergum and a triple tray to some big investment in an oral scanner?
Well, first off, the oral scanners are not more, from the statistics that I've seen in the research, and this would be in a laboratory setting, the accuracy of the intraoral scanner is about the same as good impression material. That changes a little bit in the mouth. And when officers are mixing it, you might get a more accurate fit with the intraoral scanner. That said, the materials and the milling of these materials are not as accurate as either a great impression or an intraoral scanner. So does it make any difference? Probably not. And not from an accuracy standpoint. In terms of the fit, it probably on an average basis does not make a difference. I don't think that the intraoral scanners are cost effective today yet. I think they will be, but I don't think they are yet. That's just my opinion. They can lead to a faster turnaround time with a lab. You take a scan, you shoot it through the email, they work on it that night, it comes back in 3 days, teeth haven't moved as much. You don't have the inaccuracies of plaster. When most people don't know this, but when you mount models with plaster, the plaster expands quite a bit. It changes the bite. Then you're using a hinge articulator in most cases, and not very accurate at all. Doesn't duplicate the mouth movement at all. So there's more adjustments. If you have an intraoral scanner, you're going to have less adjustments, maybe a little less chair time. So I think it's a trade-off, but I can't say that I can't say in truthfulness that it's cheap enough yet.
Same exact dentist. Should she get rid of her lab bill and buy a $150,000 Cerac Sirona CAM machine?
Yeah, as good as those machines are, they're not as good as a good lab. And I don't see it, but Cerac users love them, and I respect the fact that they found a way that makes them happy.
And what percent of the dentists you think have them in the United States? How many units do you think they have out there?
That are being used or totally sold and then being some of them in storage?
Yeah, both numbers.
Yeah, I don't know. Anybody knows. I think they're claiming they may have several thousand, 10,000 are out there.
I think they claim 15,000.
Do they?
Yeah.
But there's nobody knows exactly how many are being used. Plenty of dentists, I don't know how many, but plenty of dentists have said that they've just put them away.
Well, it just comes down to the nature of the human being. When they come up to me and they say, do you think I should buy a laser or a CAD cam or CBCT or place implants? I say, do whatever it takes to run 20 red lights on the way to work. Just do what you love, follow your passion. And once you start trading time for money, doing a monotonous task, especially dentistry on patients, you're getting them shots, you're hurting them, the burnout is so high. My God, you got to love what you're doing. And I'll never forget, when my dad had Sonic drive-ins. And if you ever worked in a restaurant and seen people coming to a restaurant to eat a foot-long chili cheese dog and some tater tots and a root beer float, they're so damn happy you couldn't beat the smile off their face with a baseball bat. I'll never forget when I took my 4 kids to Disneyland one time. The kid up in front of us in line was jumping up and down. He was so excited he crapped his pants. And I thought, could you imagine having a business where people crap their pants? They're so excited to come in. And then I go into dentistry and I saw the complete other side of sapien. Now they come in, they might be as old as us, but they're scared, they're cranky, they got a toothache, they don't want to pay for this, the insurance or whatever. And dentistry's a tough job. And when you got a tough job, you better make sure that the people you're working with, you love, you like to play with those people. Don't go in a sandbox to do something that is stressful with a bunch of people that also stress you. I mean, you need to focus on your teammates. I want you driving to work all day saying, oh my God, I can't wait to get there and ask, Jan what she did Saturday or ask her how her dog, run 20 red lights to see your teammates. And if you think a laser or a CAD cam or whatever, if you think it's the coolest damn thing in the world and that'll light your boat, you can't afford not to have one. But if you think you're doing it just to make money, that's where you have to really start looking at the math closely.
I think you make a great point. If somebody buys a Cerac or a E4D, they got to want to be a lab tech. Otherwise, it's just going to be milling glass and shoving glass in the teeth. And there's nothing rewarding about shoving glass in teeth.
And some of the dentists that say, well, I'm not going to do that, I'm going to have my assistant do it, they never stop to ask, well, does the assistant want to be a lab man? And maybe she wants to do lab work less than you do. I mean, again, it's one of those things where, you're taking an impression, you're giving it to your lab man who's made 10,000 crowns. And now you decide it's just a business deal and you're going to have your assistant mill it out and she hasn't made one. And then you don't have any training program for her, or you send her to one course and you haven't even asked her if she even wants to do this. You know what I mean? There's so many variables. There's nothing binomial, yes, no, up, down, left, right.
Yeah, there are. But I want to bring you back to a point you just made just a second ago. And that is enjoying what you do and taking control of it. When I was in practice, there was something very different about the way I practiced from others. I mean, there's plenty of very successful people more successful than I was. But what I sense with a lot of dentists is they don't come across having confidence. A bully looks for a victim. Doesn't look for strength. A bully looks for a victim. And because people respond, they respond to other people by what they project. If we walk into an operatory feeling confident, not cocky, not egotistical, just confident that we know what we're doing, we're relaxed, we're there to enjoy the conversation through a diagnosis, we're asking right questions, we're listening, that comes across. And people will respect it and they will respond that way. You pointed out some of these patients, they just want to get in, they want to get out, they don't want to pay anything or this and that. I didn't have those patients. I got them out of my practice. That was a different time, perhaps, and maybe it was easier then. I don't know. But I do know of all the dentists the dentists that we know a lot of very successful dentists. They all know a lot about dentistry. They're all confident, and they're all communicators. And all of that comes across in the operatory, and patients will respond to that. And I think if these younger dentists are looking to get into private practice, where you really have to not only have the skills as a clinician, you have to have a little bit of theater presence. Taking some speech classes, learning communication, that's got to be on the scorecard to complete.
Absolutely. Or joining Toastmasters. It's the same thing about attire. I mean, some dentists, when they dress up and put on a shirt and a tie and a $300 pair of shoes, they dress for success. They walk in there and they can just sell the treatment plan. Other people can do it in scrubs. It's just whatever works for you, whatever gives you that self-esteem, that compliment. I know a lot of women in my office, they'll have a certain outfit they call their power suit. You know what I mean? And if they got an important meeting, they always wear that same power suit because it just makes them feel like they're 10 feet tall.
Yeah, it's a great point. When I first went into practice near the beach, I wore a polo shirt. But then I started getting uncomfortable wearing a polo shirt because I was talking about these big treatment plans in a polo shirt. And if I got uncomfortable, that was going to come across. So I started wearing a white shirt and tie and a white coat. And I don't know that it made a difference to the patients, but I felt more appropriate when I was asking for a big fee. And if I feel better, then that has to come across. I think it does. I don't know.
Yeah, and that's how I started actually getting mani-pedis. Way back in the day, there was a mani-pedi place around the corner from where I worked, and I would notice that about a third of the time I was pointing at the view box or the x-ray machine or the digital deal. I was pointing to the x-ray. I'd be sitting there looking at my finger thinking, oh my God, look at that hangnail, and there's all this black junk underneath the nail, and I would start thinking, I'm distracting myself whenever I'm looking at x-ray. So I started just going in there every couple of weeks for mani-pedi and then just got rid of that because I was self-conscious, like, if I'm pointing to that and they're looking at that and they're thinking, is he going to stick that finger in my mouth? I mean, even had a glove on or whatever, but it's funny how people are. But you got to do whatever it takes to raise your self-esteem, to give you your confidence, to give you that power to walk in there and make someone feel like they're in control, that they made a good decision, that they picked you and they're going to be okay.
Yeah, and those guys that are going into corporate practice, it's a great place to practice it. So you make some mistakes. Who cares? You don't want to make that mistake when you own your own practice. You get a great opportunity to learn.
Well, hey, I just want to, that was a very fast hour, Dean. Again, I feel like you're a brother, for 20 years. I've known you forever. Your 10,000 posts have been simply, I mean, they're mind numbing. The sharing you do, the passion, your passion comes through on every post going back 2 decades. And I just want to tell you, I love you to death. I respect you so much. Thank you so much for all you've done for dentistry, for Dentaltown. And I hope your Optin meets and exceeds all your wildest expectations.
Howard, thank you for the kind words. Mutual Admiration Society here. You've been a hero and a mentor for me and for many, many people. You've taken dentistry in a direction that it would never have gotten in a better way. Had you not been a power of one at one point in time. It always takes one. It always takes that first step. And the first step you made was a giant one. And thank you for doing that.
Well, we both need to thank Al Gore for inventing the internet. because he made this all possible.
Yes, indeed.
All right, buddy. I'll see you on the boards.
All right. You stay well.